She slept with the priest. Little Maisie's accusation echoed through the mansion, aimed squarely at the millionaire's wife. Then the woman reveals the truth, and the millionaire breaks down instantly. Comment below with a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is important, and subscribe to my channel for more stories. The shout ripped through the air like a rogue firework, causing Archibald Sterling to spill the coffee he was holding. The porcelain shattered on the marble floor, but the noise was drowned out by the child's shrill voice continuing in the foyer. She slept with the priest! She slept with the priest! Maisie, barely 4 years old, pointed a skinny finger directly at Gwendolyn, her wide eyes shining with unsettling intensity. The girl was barefoot, her clothes still carrying the scent of the streets of downtown Chicago, where she'd lived for so long. Gwendolyn Sterling paled instantly, her hands trembling as she tried to approach the child. "Maisie, honey, you can't say things like that. It's true. I saw it." The girl recoiled, backing against the wall. "You whisper in the church, and then you cry." Archibald, 65, felt a chill run down his spine. His eyes darted from the girl to his wife, searching for an explanation in Gwendolyn's delicate features. The 45-year-old woman he had known for 15 years seemed like a stranger. "Gwendolyn," his voice rasped. "What is this child talking about?" I can explain, Archibald." Gwendolyn swallowed hard, her words stumbling. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Archibald stepped forward, his imposing stature as a businessman seemingly growing. "Because this child you brought into our home is telling me my wife slept with the priest." Maisie watched the argument with wide eyes, beginning to understand her words had caused something terrible. In the 3 months she'd lived with the couple, she'd learned to recognize when adults were angry, and now the air of the mansion crackled with a tension that made her want to hide. "Archibald, please, let's discuss this privately." Gwendolyn reached for her husband's arm, but he pulled away. "No, I want to understand now." His eyes locked on Maisie. "Girl, tell me exactly what you saw." Maisie bit her lip, a nervous habit from her days on the streets. "Aunt Gwendolyn goes to church every day after lunch. She stays there with Father Michael until snack time. They stay in a little room, talking real quiet. And then," Archibald pressed, ignoring Gwendolyn's pleading looks, "then she always comes out crying. And one day I asked Mrs. Higgins at the bakery if it's normal for a wife to cry after being with a priest, and she said only if the wife slept with the priest." Maisie repeated the words she'd heard, not fully understanding their meaning. The silence was deafening. Archibald felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. In 40 years of building his construction company in Chicago, he'd faced financial crises, unfair competition, problems with suppliers, but nothing had prepared him for this. 15 years, Gwendolyn. His voice was hoarse. 15 years of marriage. "Archibald, I swear to God it's not what you think." Gwendolyn began to cry, tears streaming down her face. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you spend every afternoon with Father Michael while I work my tail off to keep a roof over our heads." Archibald gestured to the chandelier above them, to the walls lined with expensive wood paneling, to all the wealth he had amassed. "Explain why a 4-year-old knows more about my wife than I do." Maisie started to cry, realizing she'd caused a terrible fight. The little girl who had grown up in Chicago's back alleys, sleeping in doorways and begging for change near Holy Name Cathedral, had finally found a home, and now, with her innocent words, she was destroying everything. "I didn't mean to do anything bad," Maisie sobbed. "I just said what I saw." Gwendolyn knelt beside the girl, trying to comfort her, but Archibald stopped her with a sharp gesture. "Don't touch her! Don't touch anything in this house until you explain what's going on. Archibald, you're being unfair." "Unfair?" He laughed mirthlessly. "My wife spends her days with another man. A child tells me details I knew nothing about, and I'm the one being unfair?" At that moment, the doorbell rang. Archibald glanced out the window and saw Margaret, his older sister, striding towards the front door. The 70-year-old woman always appeared at the worst possible moments, as if she had a sixth sense for family drama. Great. Archibald ran a hand through his thinning hair. Just what we needed. Margaret entered the house with her usual haughty air, her small, piercing eyes immediately taking in the tense atmosphere. "What's with the long faces, Archibald? And why is this girl crying? Ask your sister-in-law." Archibald pointed to Gwendolen. "Maybe she has time to explain, since she spends all afternoon busy at church." Margaret raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting from Archibald to Gwendolen, and then to Maisie. "What's going on here?" "The girl just told me Gwendolen spends every day with Father Michael in the rectory." Archibald folded his arms. "And that after these meetings, my wife always comes out crying." Margaret's eyes gleamed with barely concealed satisfaction. For 15 years of her brother's marriage, she'd always suspected something was off about Gwendolen. A woman who couldn't have children, who spent hours at church, who was too nice to be true. "Well," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false concern, "that explains a lot." "Explains what?" Gwendolen asked, wiping tears from her face. "A woman who can't give her husband children always seeks compensation elsewhere." Margaret spoke the words slowly, letting them sink into Archibald's mind like poison. "I always thought your religious devotion was a little too intense." Archibald felt each word echoing in his head, fueling suspicions he didn't even know he harbored. Gwendolen recoiled, as if struck. The following days transformed the Sterling mansion into a silent battlefield. Archibald woke before dawn and spent long hours in his office, avoiding eye contact with his wife during breakfast. Gwendolen, in turn, barely touched her food, the lump in her throat growing with each loaded silence. Maisie watched everything from her corner of the living room, playing quietly with the toys Gwendolen had bought her. The 4-year-old carried a weight she didn't fully understand, but she felt the guilt growing in her small chest with every sad look she saw on the woman who had taken her off the streets. On the second morning after the discovery, Archibald made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going straight to the construction site, he parked his car 2 blocks from Holy Name Cathedral and waited. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, precisely, he saw Gwendolen walking down the sidewalk, her nervous hands adjusting the scarf on her hair. Archibald's heart pounded as he watched his wife enter the side door of the church, the same door that led directly to the rectory. 15 minutes later, Father Michael appeared, a 50-year-old man with greying hair and an elegant bearing who had always greeted Archibald cordially during Sunday Mass. Archibald remained in the car for 3 hours. 3 endless hours where his imagination created increasingly torturous scenarios. When he finally saw Gwendolen leave the church, her eyes red and swollen, something inside him broke completely. That night, during dinner, the silence was broken only by the clinking of silverware against plates. Maisie ate slowly, her big eyes darting from Archibald to Gwendolen, waiting for someone to say something. "Is Daddy Archibald mad at me?" Maisie finally asked, her small voice echoing in the dining room. Archibald looked up from his plate and met Maisie's gaze. The child had started calling him Daddy a few weeks earlier, a gesture that had warmed his heart. Now every word the girl spoke was a painful reminder of how his life had crumbled. "No, honey, Daddy's not mad at you." His voice was softer than he intended. "You just told the truth." Gwendolen let out a shaky sigh. "Archibald, please." "What, Gwendolen?" He finally looked directly at her. "Do you want me to pretend I don't know where you spend your afternoons? That I didn't see you go into the rectory today?" Gwendolen's eyes widened. "You followed me?" "I needed to know." Archibald slammed his fork down. "I needed to see with my own eyes if my wife really was—" "Was what?" Gwendolen stood up from her chair, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "Say it, Archibald. Finish the sentence." "Did you guys fight because of me?" Maisie started to cry, covering her face with her small hands. "I didn't want you to fight." Gwendolen immediately knelt to comfort the girl, but Archibald was faster. He picked Maisie up and carried her out of the dining room. "Archibald, where are you taking her?" Away from this discussion. He didn't turn to look at his wife. A child shouldn't witness this. Archibald took Maisie to his office upstairs, a space that had become his refuge during those difficult days. The girl snuggled into his lap on the leather armchair, still sobbing softly. "Daddy, did I do something really bad?" Maisie asked, looking at him with those big eyes that always reminded him of his own difficult childhood. "No, little one, you didn't do anything bad." Archibald stroked the girl's curly hair. "Sometimes adults fight, but it's not the children's fault. But you weren't fighting before I told you about Aunt Gwendolen and the priest." Archibald felt a pang in his chest. How could he explain the complexities of a marriage in crisis to a 4-year-old? How could he say that suspicions about his wife were eating away at his heart like acid? "Maisie, I want you to tell me everything you saw at the church. But this time tell me slowly, with details." The girl sat up in his lap, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Aunt Gwendolen always goes there after lunch. She goes in the little door on the side, not the big door in front." "And the priest?" "He's always waiting for her. They go to a little room with a big table in the middle." Maisie gestured as she spoke, her small hands describing the room. "There are lots of papers on the table." "Papers?" "Yeah. And they look at the papers, talking real quiet. Sometimes Aunt Gwendolen takes papers out of her purse and shows them to the priest." Archibald frowned. That didn't sound like the romantic tryst he'd imagined. "And then they pray together, on their knees in front of that Jesus on the cross that's on the wall." Maisie pointed to the crucifix on the office wall. "And when they finish praying, Aunt Gwendolen always cries." "Do you know why she cries?" Maisie shook her head. "I don't know, but it's a different cry than when she's sad because there's no baby in her tummy." The girl's words hit Archibald like a punch. Throughout all their years of marriage, the inability to have children had been an open wound in their relationship. Gwendolen suffered in silence, and he had learned to recognize the different kinds of tears she shed. "Maisie, are you sure they only talk and pray?" "Yes, Daddy. They don't even touch each other. They always stay on opposite sides of the big table." Archibald felt a stab of guilt growing in his chest. Maybe he was being unfair to Gwendolen. Maybe his suspicions were unfounded. But then, why was she hiding these meetings? Why did she cry after the prayers? At that moment, Margaret's voice echoed from downstairs. "Archibald, where are you?" Archibald sighed. His sister had made a habit of showing up at the house every day since the argument, always with poisonous comments about Gwendolen and her suspicious activities at the church. "Stay here and play, little one. Daddy's going to talk to Aunt Margaret, and he'll be right back." Archibald went downstairs and found Margaret in the living room, talking animatedly to Gwendolen, or rather, talking to herself, while Gwendolen listened in silence, her face growing paler by the minute. "Ah, Archibald." Margaret turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just telling Gwendolen what I've been hearing around town." "What have you heard?" Archibald asked, although he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "Well, you know how it is in a small town. People talk." Margaret sat down on the sofa, clearly pleased to be the center of attention. "Mrs. Higgins at the bakery mentioned that Gwendolen is getting awfully close to the priest. And she's not the only one." Gwendolen stood up abruptly. "Margaret, I'm not going to stand here listening to these slanders." "Slanders?" Margaret laughed. "Honey, when a married woman spends every day at church talking alone with the priest, people are going to talk." "Enough!" Archibald shouted, surprising both women. "Margaret, go home! Now!" "Archibald, now, Margaret, Gwendolen and I need to talk." After his sister left, Archibald turned to Gwendolen. His wife was leaning against the wall, her arms crossed over her chest as if trying to protect herself. "Gwendolen, I need you to tell me the truth. About the meetings with Father Michael, about why you cry, about the papers that Maisie saw." Gwendolen closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then looked directly at her husband. Will you believe me? It depends on what you say. It's not what you think, Archibald. I swear on my mother's grave, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Gwendolen hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. I can't. Not yet. The silence that followed was devastating. Archibald felt all his suspicions confirmed in that refusal. The weeks that followed were the darkest of Archibald Sterling's life. What had started as suspicion morphed into a morbid obsession, consuming his days and nights. He hired Mr. Henderson, a retired foreman from the construction company, to discreetly monitor Gwendolen's movements in the afternoons. She enters the church promptly at 2 and leaves at 5, Henderson reported nightly by phone. Always through the back, always with swollen eyes when she leaves. Archibald began waking in the middle of the night, watching Gwendolen sleep beside him, trying to detect signs of guilt in her peaceful breathing. During the day, he analyzed every word she spoke, every gesture, every look, searching for evidence of a betrayal she refused to confess. The situation at home rapidly deteriorated. Meals became agonizingly silent rituals, where only Maisie attempted to break the tension with her innocent questions about when Daddy and Mommy Gwendolen would stop being sad. "Daddy, why don't you eat with me anymore?" Maisie asked one Thursday morning when Archibald rose from the table without touching the breakfast Gwendolen had prepared. "Daddy's not hungry, little one. But you're too skinny." The girl climbed onto the chair and touched Archibald's bearded face with her small hands. "And your eyes are all dark, like Aunt Gwendolen's." Archibald glanced at his wife, who immediately averted her gaze. Gwendolen had lost at least 10 pounds in those weeks, her dresses now too loose, her skin as pale as paper. "Maisie, go play in the backyard," Archibald said. "Daddy needs to talk to Mommy Gwendolen." After the girl left, Archibald sat back down at the table. "Gwendolen, this has to stop." "What?" She didn't lift her eyes from her plate. "This situation, this house has become a tomb. Maisie is noticing something is wrong. And whose fault is that?" Gwendolen finally looked at him, her eyes flashing with suppressed anger. "Who decided I was guilty without even giving me a chance to explain? I gave you a chance. I asked about the meetings, about the papers, about everything, and you said you couldn't tell me. Because it's complicated, Archibald. Because it involves other people, other matters, That what?" Archibald slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. "That involve you and that priest?" Gwendolen stood up abruptly, tears finally spilling over. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't stand you looking at me like I'm a stranger, an adulteress. Then tell me the truth." "I can't!" Gwendolen shouted, her voice echoing through the house. "Not yet. Please, Archibald, trust me for a few more weeks." "Just a few weeks?" "A few weeks for what? For you to understand everything." Archibald laughed humorlessly. "Understand what? That my wife has secret meetings with another man and can't explain why?" At that moment, Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway, as always at the worst possible moment. "Good grief! What's all the shouting? I can hear it from the street." "Margaret, now is not the time," Archibald said, but his sister was already entering and settling into a chair. "Archibald, honey, you need to make a decision about this situation." Margaret looked directly at Gwendolen with barely disguised contempt. "A woman who doesn't respect her husband doesn't deserve the roof over her head." "Margaret!" Gwendolen turned to her sister-in-law, her fists clenched. "You have no right to protect my brother? To watch him wither away because of a woman who's blatantly deceiving him?" "I'm not deceiving anyone." "No?" Margaret stood up, her haughty posture intimidating Gwendolen. "Then why can't you explain where you spend your afternoons? Why do you cry after the meetings? Why do you hide papers in your purse?" Gwendolen paled. "How do you know about the papers?" Margaret smiled maliciously. "Honey, in a city like Chicago, everyone knows everything. Mrs. Higgins saw you putting documents in your purse before entering the church. Mrs. Davies saw you crying in the park after leaving there. Even Mr. Carlson at the bank mentioned you've been moving money around without your husband knowing." Archibald straightened in his chair. "What's this about moving money around?" Gwendolen recoiled as if struck. "Archibald, I can explain that too." "Too?" He stood up slowly. "How many more things are you hiding from me, Gwendolen?" "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Margaret folded her arms. "Because an honest woman doesn't hide money from her husband to give to a priest." The silence was deafening. Archibald looked at Gwendolen as if seeing her for the first time. "You're giving him money?" "Archibald, answer me. Are you giving our money to Father Michael?" Gwendolen closed her eyes, took a deep breath and whispered, "Yes." The word landed like a bomb in the kitchen. Archibald felt his legs weaken and had to lean on the table. Margaret smiled with satisfaction, as if all her suspicions had been confirmed. "How much?" Archibald's voice was hoarse. "Archibald, please, let me explain the context. How much money did you give him?" Gwendolen hesitated before answering. $50,000. Archibald felt the world spin around him. $50,000 was a significant amount, even for a successful businessman like him. $50,000, he repeated slowly. "You took $50,000 from our accounts to give to a priest." "It wasn't like that." "How was it then?" Margaret interjected. "Because as far as I know, when a married woman gives money to another man, there can only be one reason." "Shut up, Margaret," Gwendolen exploded. "You don't know anything. You don't understand anything." "I understand that my brother has worked his whole life to build what he has, and now he discovers his wife is bankrolling a priest with his money." Archibald raised his hand, asking for silence. His head was pounding, his heart beating erratically. "Gwendolen, I want you to leave this house." The whisper was so low it was barely audible. Gwendolen's eyes widened. "What?" "I want you to leave this house, today." "Archibald, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious." He looked directly at her, his blue eyes hard as ice. 15 years of marriage. 15 years believing I knew the woman I share my bed with. And I find out you have a secret life, secret meetings, secret financial transactions. Archibald, please, let me explain. "Explain what?" "That you're in love with him, that you need our money to what? To run away with him?" Gwendolen collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "That's not it! I swear to God, that's not it!" "Then what is it?" I can't say. Not yet." "Not yet?" Archibald laughed bitterly. "When then? When you've taken all our money? When the whole town is laughing at me behind my back?" At that moment, Maisie appeared in the kitchen doorway, her big eyes full of tears. The girl had heard the shouting and come to investigate. "Why is everyone crying?" she asked in her small voice. Archibald looked at the girl who had become like a daughter to him, then at Gwendolen, still sobbing in the chair, and finally at Margaret, who observed everything with poorly disguised satisfaction. "Maisie," he said, his voice softening, "come here to Daddy." The girl ran into Archibald's arms and he picked her up. "Daddy, is Mummy Gwendolen leaving?" Archibald looked at Gwendolen, who raised her pleading eyes to him. For a moment he hesitated. But then he remembered the secret meetings, the money, the hidden papers, all the lies of omission. "Yes, little one. Mommy Gwendolen is leaving." Gwendolen let out a moan of pain, as if she had been physically wounded. "Archibald, you're destroying our family over misunderstandings." "I'm not destroying anything. You already did." Archibald turned his back on her. "I want you to be gone before I get back from work." "And Maisie." Gwendolen stood up, reaching out to the girl. "Maisie is my daughter too." "Maisie is staying with me. You can't do this." "I can." Archibald glanced at her over his shoulder. "You brought this girl into our home, made her get attached to us, and now you want to destroy the stability she's finally found. Maisie stays." Gwendolen held out her arms to Maisie, who looked confused from one adult to the other. "Maisie, "Honey, come give Mommy a hug." "No." Archibald pulled the girl away. "You've caused enough confusion in her life." And so, on that painful Thursday morning, Gwendolyn Sterling left the house where she had been happy for 15 years, carrying only a small suitcase and the weight of a secret she couldn't reveal. 2 months had passed since Gwendolyn had left home, and the Sterling mansion had become a dark and silent place. Archibald tried to maintain a normal routine for Maisie, but the girl had become listless, playing little, and constantly asking when Mommy Gwendolyn would come home. "She's not coming back, little one," Archibald said every time, feeling his heart clench at the sadness in the child's eyes. Margaret had moved temporarily into the mansion, claiming that Archibald needed help taking care of Maisie, but her constant presence only intensified the heavy atmosphere of the house. The 70-year-old woman made a point of daily reminding him of Gwendolyn's mistakes and how Archibald had made the right choice. "You're much better off without that woman," she repeated during the silent dinners. "I always knew there was something off about her." One Friday morning, as Archibald drank coffee alone in the large, empty kitchen, Maisie ran downstairs, holding a piece of paper in her small hands. "Daddy! Daddy! Look what I found." Archibald looked up from the newspaper he was pretending to read. "What is it, little one?" "I found this under Mommy Gwendolyn's bed." Maisie held out the paper, her eyes shining with excitement. "It has drawings of a big house." Archibald took the paper and felt his blood run cold. It was a detailed architectural plan of a large building with several bedrooms, large rooms, an industrial kitchen, and even a playground. In the upper right corner, written in Gwendolyn's handwriting, was "New Dawn Orphanage, Initial Project." "Where exactly did you find this, Maisie?" "Under the bed, in a little box that fell out when Aunt Margaret was cleaning the room." Archibald examined the plan more closely. There were notes in the margins, cost calculations, lists of materials, all written in Gwendolyn's careful handwriting. On the back of the sheet, he found the address of a piece of land on the outskirts of Chicago and a date. Start of construction, December 15th. "Maisie, show me where this little box was." The girl led him to the room that had been Gwendolyn's. Margaret was there, organizing the last of the clothes that had been left behind. "Margaret, what little box is this?" His sister turned, holding a small wooden box in her hands. "Oh, this? I found it under the bed." It must be more of her secret papers. Archibald took the box from Margaret's hands and opened it. Inside were dozens of documents: land purchase contracts, construction budgets, correspondence with suppliers, and a folder full of letters bearing the letterhead of the Diocese of Chicago. With trembling hands, Archibald opened the first letter. It was an official correspondence from Father Michael to Gwendolyn, dated 6 months ago. "Dear Gwendolyn, following our meeting this afternoon, I confirm that the diocese fully approves the New Dawn Orphanage project. Your proposal to create a home for orphaned and abandoned children is laudable and necessary in our city. I look forward to our next meeting to discuss the details of the legal documentation and construction schedule." Archibald felt his legs weaken. He opened another letter, then another. All spoke about the orphanage project, about planning meetings, about Gwendolyn's dedication to creating an institution that could house children like Maisie. "My God," he whispered, falling onto the bed. "What is it, Archibald?" Margaret tried to look at the papers. "What letters are those?" Archibald continued reading, discovering that Gwendolyn had sold all the jewelry she had inherited from her mother to buy the land where the orphanage would be built. The $50,000 she had given to the priest was actually the first installment of the project's financing. In one of the most recent letters, Father Michael explained that he had secured 2 more funders for the project: a businessman from Rockford and a wealthy family from Chicago who preferred to remain anonymous. The orphanage was to be inaugurated on Archibald and Gwendolyn's 15th wedding anniversary. It was supposed to be a surprise. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Maisie climbed onto the bed and touched Archibald's face. Archibald hadn't even realized that tears were streaming down his face. For 2 months he had lived believing that his wife had betrayed him, that she had chosen another man, that his life had been a lie. And now he discovered that Gwendolen was planning an orphanage, a place for children like Maisie to have a new chance in life. "Margaret," he said in a hoarse voice, "did you know about this?" His sister had paled at hearing the revelations. I didn't know, Archibald. You thought what?" Archibald stood up, still holding the papers. "You fueled my suspicions. You made a point of spreading rumors around town. You convinced me that my wife was cheating on me." "Archibald, I was just trying to protect you." "Protect?" He laughed bitterly. "You destroyed my marriage, destroyed a family. And why? Because you could never stand to see Gwendolen happy." Margaret recoiled, for the first time in years without a ready answer. "Archibald, I didn't know that—" "Get out of my house." His voice was dangerously low. "Now! Archibald, now!" He shouted with a force that made Maisie hide behind him. "I don't want to see you here anymore." After Margaret's tumultuous departure, Archibald was left alone with Maisie in the room, surrounded by the wreckage of his marriage and the truth that had come too late. "Daddy, was Mommy Gwendolen building a house for children like me?" Maisie asked, flipping through one of the plans. "Yes, little one, she was." "Is that why she was crying? Because she wanted to help other children?" Archibald nodded, unable to speak. During those weeks of arguments, Gwendolen had tried to explain, had begged for trust, had cried, pleading for just a few more weeks to reveal everything. And he had refused to believe her. That afternoon, Archibald drove to the address he'd found in the papers. It was a large plot of land on the outskirts of the city, where the foundations of a large building had already begun. A makeshift sign read, "Future New Dawn Orphanage, soon offering hope for children in need." Archibald parked the car and walked onto the property. There was physical proof of Gwendolen's dream, the project she had hidden to surprise him. The tears she shed after meetings with Father Michael weren't from guilt or regret. They were from emotion at creating something meaningful. "Archibald." He turned and saw Father Michael walking toward him from a small temporary building that served as the construction office. "Father." Archibald couldn't look directly at the man he'd considered his rival. "I came to check on the progress of the construction. Gwendolen asked me to keep a close eye on it during her absence." The priest paused. "You know about the project?" "I just found out." Father Michael sighed deeply. "Archibald, your wife is an extraordinary woman. For months, she worked tirelessly on this project. She sold everything of value, studied legislation, talked to social workers, planned every detail. Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she wanted it to be a surprise for your wedding anniversary." The priest looked at the unfinished building. "She said it was the most important gift she could give you, the chance to change the lives of dozens of children together." Archibald felt the weight of guilt crushing his chest. "Where is she?" "Living in a boarding house downtown. Working at a clothing store to pay the rent." Father Michael looked directly at him. "Archibald, may I offer some advice? Gwendolen is broken, not just by the separation, but because she sees her dream being interrupted. If you go to her, be to truly ask for forgiveness or to walk away for good, she can't take any more uncertainty." That night, Archibald couldn't sleep. At 5 in the morning, he got up and went to Maisie's room. The girl was awake, looking out the window. "Can't sleep, little one?" "I'm thinking about Mommy Gwendolen." Maisie turned to him. "Daddy, are you going to get her?" Archibald sat on the bed and picked up the girl. "Do you want me to get her?" "I really do. The house is so sad without her. What if she doesn't want to come back? What if she's too mad at me?" Maisie thought for a moment, with the seriousness of a 4-year-old trying to solve adult problems. "Then you say you're sorry. When I do something wrong, I say I'm sorry, and the person always forgives me." At 7 in the morning, Archibald was at the door of the boarding house where Gwendolen was staying. The establishment was simple. very different from the mansion where she had lived for 15 years. He went up to the second floor and knocked on the door of room number 7. Gwendolen opened the door, and Archibald barely recognized her. She had lost weight dramatically, her hair was unkempt, and there was a deep sadness in her eyes that he had never seen before. "Archibald," her voice was a whisper. "Gwendolen, I need to talk to you." She hesitated, then opened the door wider. The room was small and Spartan, with only a bed, an old dresser, and a window overlooking a narrow alley. "I found out about the orphanage," he said bluntly. Gwendolen closed her eyes and sighed. "Maisie found the papers?" "Yes. And I went to the construction site. I talked to Father Michael." Archibald approached her. "Gwendolen, I made the biggest mistake of my life." "Archibald? No, let me speak. For 2 months I lived believing that you had betrayed me, that you were in love with another man, that our marriage had been a lie." His words came out tumbling over each other. "And I found out that you were creating something beautiful, something important, that you sold everything you had to help children, that you wanted to surprise me." Gwendolen began to cry silently. "I tried to explain. I know. And I refused to listen. I refused to trust the woman I've loved for 15 years. Archibald knelt before her. "Gwendolen, will you forgive me? Archibald, you kicked me out of the house. You separated me from Maisie. You destroyed our family because you couldn't trust me." "I know, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." He took her hands. "Come home, Gwendolen, come home to me and Maisie. Let's finish the orphanage together. Let's realize your dream together." Gwendolen looked at him for a long moment, her eyes still shining with tears. "And your sister?" "Margaret won't interfere in our life anymore, I promise. And if you start to distrust me again, never again. I've learned that trust can't be given halfway." Archibald stood up and hugged her. "I love you, Gwendolen. I love you, I love Maisie, and I love what you wanted to create to help other children." When they returned home that morning, Maisie was waiting for them on the porch, as if she knew that day would be special. The girl ran into Gwendolen's arms, and for the first time in 2 months, the Sterling mansion echoed with laughter and happiness again. The New Dawn Orphanage was inaugurated exactly on Archibald and Gwendolen's 15th wedding anniversary, becoming the home of 20 orphaned and abandoned children. Maisie was officially adopted by the couple, and her story inspired many other families in the region to open their hearts to children in need. And so, what had begun with an innocent accusation from a 4-year-old girl turned into a lesson about trust, forgiveness, and the transformative power of true love. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring everyday videos that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a grade from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.